Thanks for joining us. I'm Martin Wong from USC Visions and Voices, the Arts and Humanities Initiative, and I'm super excited to introduce tonight's event, which will be the closest I've come to going to a jam-packed punk show with an unbelievable lineup surrounded by old and new friends, right in front and way too long. But first, at Visions and Voices, we believe it's important to open our events by acknowledging the land that we share. We are based at USC in Los Angeles, whose campuses were built on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tongva, Chumash, and Kizh nations. We honor them and all Indigenous people, past, present, and future, and pay respect to their continued survival and contributions to our society. We also honor the legacy of the African diaspora and recognize that this country would not exist without the enslaved labor of Black people. We share these acknowledgements to raise awareness about histories that are too often erased or forgotten, to recognize our place in this history, and to affirm our commitment to social change. We value the connections between the arts and social justice, and present and promote the arts and humanities as a way to transform our lives and our communities. This evening's guests are from bands that I never got to see, but were very influential and important to the early LA punk scene that I love. Coming from East L.A., the Undertakers, the Brat, and Stains were essential counterparts to their more storied peers from Hollywood, the Valley, the South Bay, and even Orange County. Thankfully, Razorcake magazine has seen fit to document and celebrate them in a series of short films. This evening's screening and panel is presented as part of the LA Times Festival of Books, with support from La Casa. It will include the director and members of each band, moderated by Dino Everett, archivist for Eastside Punks and the USC School of Cinematic Arts, and bass player for the Streetwalkin' Cheetahs. Captions will be provided in English on Zoom. Live captioning in Spanish is being provided at oneinterpreting.com/punks, and we're sharing the link in the chat. So thanks again for coming, and here's Dino.
Thanks, Martin. I want to welcome everybody here, and thank you for checking out the screening. One of the main reasons is the documentary series, Eastside Punks, that has been directed by Jimmy Alvarado and is presented by Razorcake. We're going to see a nice, about 10-minute short with excerpts from the 3 episodes representing the 3 bands tonight. So we're going to just go right into the video, and then when we come back, we're going to do the Q&A.
I was born East Los Angeles, the Boyle Heights area. There's 11 of us in our family, second to the youngest.
I was born to a pretty big family, 7 siblings, my mom and dad, very Catholic. When the freeways kind of tore up those neighborhoods, these people started to leave, so my dad had an opportunity to buy a house for cheap, and that's how we kind of moved into Boyle Heights.
I had a lot of freedom as a child. My parents were pretty much burnt out raising everyone before me, so I pretty much got to do whatever I wanted. I've always felt that music was in me and that I needed to pursue music. I had a brother that's just slightly older than me, and he was into the glitter rock, like the David Bowie punk rock. So like together we formed one of our first punk rock bands.
I was a singer since I was really young. I mean, I was in school choir. I was like a high soprano. Even when I was really young, I always felt like I was an outsider. I didn't really feel like I fit in. And I think that whole punk thing, when it sort of came around, it kind of catered to the outsider in a way. It was sort of like a movement for people that didn't fit into the mainstream. And I felt like that was just like my whole life was not being able to fit in.
I just love the simple approach about it. I don't have to be this super slick guitarist. You know, I could just write my own songs with the little knowledge that I have. And it wasn't like you go to the mall and you pick up your punk rock outfit like it is now, you know. And so that was very appealing.
I'd always had a desire to be in a band somehow, but like I said, I wasn't really good at going out and meeting people and networking that way. I had one friend, Sean Carrillo, and one night we went out to the Starwood together. We were going to go see the Jam.
There was a few people from East Los Angeles, and one of them was Teresa Covarrubias.
Well, I saw Rudy Medina, and I used to go to school with his sister.
She came up to me and she goes, "Hey, I know you." You know, we just met and we started talking, and she really blew my mind because she was so different from anyone I had ever met. She used to write lyrics, which I thought was interesting. I never really met someone that was so creative like her. And, you know, I told her about my band falling apart, and she said, "Oh yeah, I play in a band too." I said, "You do? Can you sing?"
I got a lot of influence just from the neighborhood, just watching different characters in the neighborhood. Everything I was writing about were experiences that were happening to me. Sitting at Yum Yum, you know, all night and just sitting there and watching people come in and out, watching the cops come in and out, just things that would happen. And just on that one little corner, you know, if you sit at Yum Yum long enough for enough evenings, you see the same people kind of coming in. You can start creating like ideas about what's going on with them or what they're experiencing.
In the early days when we used to play backyard parties on these weird little like dive bars or whatever, I think a lot of the early punk bands in East L.A. weren't even playing fast. They were more like kind of like the Pistols and kind of the Ramones, which the Ramones weren't even that fast. We get up on there and we have our
Original
suits,
stuff, yeah.
red weird bands, rosaries, crucifixes, whatever. We're just like we don't fit. People would just be standing there going, "What the fuck are these guys?" They didn't understand what we were doing. And we knew what we were doing because we wanted to be different.
You know, people consider us punk, some say we're hardcore. People say different things, but we just think of ourselves as just a band. We don't like to be category in here's punk or you're hardcore or you're this or you're that, you know. We just like to be ourselves.
We start playing and just cans come flying at us. And we're like, okay. And I see guys from my school and girls like, "You guys fucking suck." I'm like, okay, we're doing something wrong or right, I don't know. And then Art said, "Yeah, keep throwing your cans, we got your fucking money." They stopped throwing cans, they started realizing, well, these guys are kind of an attitude.
I was born in Texas, El Paso. We migrated out of here, but we went through the trials and tribulations of moving around like about 6-7 times before we settled in, you know, up in City Terrace.
Where I lived was near Atlantic and Whittier, and actually, when they had the Whittier riots, I can get on the roof where I lived and you can just see all the fire and smoke. Back then, it was pretty dirty and pretty, you know, it wasn't a pretty place, you know, our families were struggling, whatever, but, you know, when we started all hanging out together, it kind of like that became our family.
Mike brought Tracy over. Well, he was telling me about Tracy already because he was going to Garfield at the time.
So I started hanging out with this guy, Robert, at school, and he went to his house and he had the Dolls, he had the Pistols, he had the Ramones, he had all the stuff that I'd never even heard of.
And then we jammed. We played one of his songs, Death Breath. And then that's how it all started.
You know, before the band actually got Art in the band, Mike's like, "Oh, you gotta come to this party and check out the singer," because we needed a singer. You know, we started out as a 3-piece, long hair.
Mike, I knew before, Mike will always follow and tag along. He was like 14. I was like 17, 18 at the time.
So we went to go check out Art in the backyard party. They're rocking out. That's when you had your little scarves on your microphone.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're like jumping around like Mick Jagger, and they're all jamming. But I mean, it was cool because these guys can play, you know. And so we're like going, you know. And then Mike kept saying, "Hey, we should get Art in the band."
With the band I was in, I was seeking the next step, which is originals. It was time to get out of the box. So when I got into the Undertakers, they had songs like Grave Digger, Rosie Cross, which was like slow Black Sabbath stuff, you know, with these crazy beats. And I was, well, you know, big graveyard music. And so I would bring stuff like Generation X over. Come on, we'll do something like this, let's do stuff like this, you know.
We started going out to clubs and then I started tripping out on that. So then I started writing originals that were more energetic.
My thing was I was a big Black Sabbath fan. So why not take the creepiness and make it faster? So I just started writing faster songs.
I was born and raised in Boyle Heights, East L.A. I remember it being safe. I never felt threatened. I knew there was gangs in the area. They never bothered me.
You know, my earliest memories are like fucking rallies and parades, you know, like, you know, the Brown Berets and Chicano Power, that whole thing. Ruben Salazar, that's one of my earliest memories. It was like 1970.
You guys ready?
I was born in El Monte, California, and raised in Temple City. My side of the tracks is, you know, more white bread and stuff like that. And the white dudes were like, dude, you know, I was supposed to be the conduit, you know, since I was brown, you know, and I didn't know Spanish, so it was like, you know, it didn't work out.
It was extremely difficult to be different, to be a rocker. Even just to have long hair in East Los Angeles at that time did not go over well with the neighborhood, but I didn't give a fuck.
Right before I graduated from high school, started hearing about punk rock. It was like, wow, this is great. It's something new. This is something we can call ours. This is our generation music. I had an alcoholic father who wasn't there a lot of things going on in our household. So there was a lot of pent-up emotion, and it was a perfect way to express it.
What punk was back then, it was okay to be yourself. Women were allowed to play musical instruments because prior to that, girls playing rock and roll was unacceptable. It was okay to be gay. It was okay to be whatever you wanted to be. There was no restrictions.
I got into punk like Sex Pistols, Ramones, and Dead Boys and stuff like that, and the Cramps. My friend got me a Germs album for Christmas, and it took me like 10 times listening to it before I totally loved the album. But 10 times, you know what I mean? It was hard for me to listen to. It was hard to break through the distortion and all the movements and drums and everything to get to the lyrics and understand what he was talking about. But once I got there and understood what he was talking about, I was like, wow, you know, this is amazing.
I was playing in this hotshot band, you know, but I wanted to get out of it, you know. I wanted to play with my own, because I used to write songs and they go, you're crazy, you can't write songs, you know. And I was looking for a band, you know, I was looking for musicians, and then what was this fucking nerd sitting right there like on a bench, and they go, hey, that guy over there, he's a good guitar player. And I just hit him up. I go, hey, I heard you play guitar, blah, blah, blah. He goes, yeah, and went down to his house. He had a little tiny Princeton amp with a big muff. Wow, he would start doing Richie Blackmore. Start doing Highway Star, and I'm like, you want to start a band? You know.
The first time I met Jello Biafra was like my first show. I was dressed like a cholo in San Francisco. We were playing my first show. I'm all like shaking. And the first song we did is an instrumental, so there's no lyrics. So I just stood there all badass, like a cholo with my headband like this, you know. Nobody knew what the fuck. And so then we started playing, you know, like Sick and Crazy, you know, and I tore off the bandana and started going off and singing. And then end of the show comes and this guy with a weird voice like, hey, can I shake your hand? And I'm like, oh, yeah, who are you? You know, he's like, I'm Jello Biafra. So he shakes my hand. He's like, you know what he just did? And I'm like, well, no. Didn't you notice that there's no punks in front at all? I go, no, this is Frisco. There's hippies, there's a hippie, and this is, you know, the way I figured it would be, you know? And he's all, no, all the punks are in the back the whole time. They thought you guys were the cholos that kicked their asses every weekend. And I'm like, oh, well, I didn't even notice that. He's all, so that's why I want to shake your hand. He scared the shit out of all these punks.
All right. I think we're back now. And I want to welcome and bring in all of our panelists. We've got Jimmy Alvarado, who is responsible for the video series. We've got Teresa Covarrubias, who was the singer in the Brat. We've got Tracy Skull Garcia, who was in the Undertakers, and Jack Rivera from the Stains. I want to start right off, since we just saw the video clip, and just go to Jimmy and ask you about the project of documenting these bands. When did it start? Why did it start? Just give us a little background information on the video series.
Okay. Well, I grew up in City Terrace. I grew up in the neighborhoods. I've been involved in the punk scene in some form or another in East LA and in LA since at least 81 when I was 13 years old. We started our first band and then did what everybody else does and just kind of got in where you fit in. Towards the late 90s, I was talking to a friend of mine that had a record label and told him I had this idea that I wanted to put together a compilation of East LA bands. And he asked me, well, besides the Brat and the Illegals, who else is there? And I was surprised because he grew up in Glendale and I figured he would know, being that close, about all the different bands and all the stuff that was going on in the different scene. And so in talking to him about it, he didn't know anything. And so I decided that I would try to kind of do something about it on that end. And then in the course of trying to research in school, you know, the different academic things, I noticed that there was a very small window of, and a very limited number of bands that they were talking about. And the way that it was being framed was that it was a very small period of time, approximately 8 months in 1980, and then punk died in East LA. And it was like, I had just spent, you know, at that point, you know, 20 odd years seeing bands in backyards and this whole scene that had flourished. And there was nobody talking about it, and there was no documentation of it, or very little of it to be found. So I decided I'd try to do something about that. And I started writing some articles for Razorcake, and I've been writing since I was a kid in fanzines and things like that. And decided to try to kind of get some attention on some of the stuff that was going on. And because it seemed like East Los Angeles was kind of being marginalized even more so than normally, and kind of from the rest of LA as far as the punk scene. And I wanted to, you know, again, going the punk rock thing of going where you getting in where you fit in, and trying to kind of working towards that in that way. And so I started writing articles and interviewing people. I interviewed Teresa and Rudy for Razorcake, and I interviewed the guys in the Illegals, and my friend Jesse, who was the original bass player for the Stains, and with the idea that I was going to do a series of articles and maybe a book. And then my friend Pat and my friend Jake said, hey, you know, why don't we just film this stuff, you know, since we're doing that. So we started filming about 2006. And then that was an ongoing project, and we've been interviewing bands since then. And then a couple of years ago, my wife Carla had been bugging us about getting the stuff out, and because it's a never-ending project. I mean, there's hundreds of people to interview, and for me, I'm one of those guys that will just keep going and keep going. And she wanted me to focus, so she said, "Why don't you talk to Todd at Razorcake and see about having him put these up as an oral history or something like that, and doing it that way." And so finally I listened to her and we got it up, and we started working together and putting these together, and decided, instead of making one big large film that will never end, doing these smaller videos to kind of highlight certain subjects and certain bands and things like that as a way to you know, kind of keep it open-ended and be able to cover a larger breadth of things, as opposed to kind of crunching it all down. I mean, as it is, these videos are crunching down entire histories and lives of people into, you know, anywhere from 8 to 18 minute segments. So I figured it was a better idea to kind of do it this way, and have them so that we can cover several generations without the time constraints and things. So,
great. Now to the musicians. I'm by no means a historian on East LA punk rock like Jimmy here, but I am a fan. But growing up, I was growing up on the other side of the country, and so fanzines were very important. And I don't know of any East LA fanzines. And I remember only a few sort of articles. I had one here from Punk Globe, one tiny little picture of the Brat. And then I do remember an interview with the Undertakers in, I think, issue 22 of Flipside. But outside of that, I mean, it didn't seem like, for me as an outsider, that there was a lot of coverage in the day. And I noticed a couple of you mentioned feeling like outsiders back then. did you feel embraced, or did it feel like you were still outsiders, even though you have your band and you're playing? Did it feel like you were outsider musicians, outsider bands? And any of you can roll with that.
We never thought we were outsiders. I mean, I think we're more outsiders in East L.A. than anywhere else because people just didn't. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, because like we were a certain way. We didn't fit in with some people, and when we played out of East L.A., it didn't matter, if people said stuff to us or whatever. We were just there to play. We were there to play our music. Art even said that we were just there to entertain. If you didn't like us or you thought we were from a East LA, whatever, so what? That's where we're bred from. But we're able to go all over the place and play. So I don't know. I never felt like an outsider. I mean, we got a lot of crap from people, but hey, that's just part of music. It's like that's been in the whole history of music, punk, whatever you want to say. Everybody's an outsider.
Did it feel like there was an East LA scene? Because you said you felt more like an outsider in East LA.
There was a scene, and we connected with everybody. But you have to remember, it's like having a kid. You gotta let it go sometime. And everybody had to go explore other areas. Being tagged in one thing, we needed to go out and show people what we can do. We were just we would go out and let people see all these bands presented each other. Their dress, their code, their music. I mean, that's what I mean. Like I don't want to say that we were outsiders in East LA. It's just that we fit, but we knew that we could move on and play anywhere. And no matter what people thought about us, we still believe in ourselves.
What about?
I think everybody has their own sense of where they fit in different places. I mean, I know we all felt like, you saw the little clips, everybody felt like they were an outsider to start with. I feel like there was a time in East LA where there felt like there was a really cohesive scene for a bit. I think once also we started breaking out of that and maybe doing shows on the West Side or in Orange County and stuff. I don't know about anybody else, but I know I always felt like an outsider going into those areas. And I always felt, first of all, that there was expectations on what I was supposed to be or do as an East LA band, as a woman, as somebody that was supposed to represent. And I always felt like there was always like an uncertainty and not really an acceptance right away of what we were, because I don't think people really a lot of times understood what they had expectations that I guess we didn't meet or did meet. I don't know. It's just, I always felt kind of like there wasn't really a place for us. I mean, the Brat took it to a point where we were actually being courted by some record companies. And I know that experience was horrible because they totally did not, they were trying to make us into something that we were absolutely not, trying to make us fit this mold of like a girl band, like a lead singer girl band. And it never felt right. So as far as like that, like feeling like, no, I don't fit. I felt like I did not fit in that, like that whole A&R world that was happening back in the 80s. That was my experience. And I know, like I say, everybody's is different.
Am I on here?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? It's funny because I don't think my band in particular felt that way, because we actually were accepted by the greater, punk scene or whatever you call it. We were outsiders in the sense that, we were punks and we looked different. And back then you had the creeps like screaming Devo at you when you're walking down the street and shit like that. So that,
it's
punk rock, all that crap.
Devo was a curse word.
Yeah. Actually,
I think we all got that at some point. Yeah.
I actually bought that first record and enjoyed it, but we were accepted well. I think probably more than the other bands out of the East Side. We played with them, and I mean, you know the story. Things like, oh, you know, oh, they're the Stains. Here come the Mexicans. You know, I remember that kind of stuff. But that was more of a joke, and we kind of were. But you know, nobody really fucked with us that way. They weren't rude or didn't make us feel funny. You know, just for jokes and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, we had a good experience that way, and I mean, to this day, I mean, people love the record, and it's not just one particular, you know, neighborhood or whatever. It's you know, punk fans love the record, and that's what it's important. It's what matters.
Yeah.
You know, for me.
So coming from a sort of collective area, a lot of times different places and cities and things, there are events that sort of shape those people, and that sort of influences how they look at the world and what they write about and things like that. Were there any, like, I know that I've talked to a few early punks, and the Moratorium comes up as something that was influential. I'm just wondering if there was anything that you think might be cohesive coming from the East Side that did sort of influence your writing and your music and stuff, that makes sort of like an East Side sound or an East Side, you know, commonality
To it. Well, we were pissed off, like most punk bands, like true punk bands were young, pissed off kids, you know. We weren't cheerleader football kids. I was always an outsider in that sense, you know, once I got into high school. But yeah, I mean, you can hear the Stains music, and, you know, Jesse wrote the lyrics, and he had a very unique life experience. You know, I don't know, it obviously wasn't great all the time. And you listen to these lyrics and they're pretty twisted, you know, but they are interesting and they're powerful and they're good. And the music was really aggressive. And, you know, I was playing drums since I was literally a baby. So by the time I came around, it was just a great way to express that. It's like, wow, I can play my drums. I don't have to sit in my mom's living room. Here I am, and people are digging it, you know. So I suppose that's, you know, what it was like for us. You know, it's a great way to express ourselves and get out of East L.A. and just be amongst, you know, our peers, just American kids that were our age and you know, like-minded.
I think the working class, the working class aspect of being born in a place where people are struggling, they're struggling to survive, they're struggling just to make it, you know, in American society. I think that has a lot to do with what spoke to me. And you don't only find that in East LA. I think that you find communities like that all over the place. And I think especially now. So I think that that element of struggle, of things not coming easy and having to work hard and really like nothing is ever handed to you. I think that aspect of being coming from a working class neighborhood spoke a lot to me, and I think speaks a lot to what we write about, or what I wrote about when I was writing music with the band.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of authenticity. I think there's a little bit more authenticity to the stuff that comes out of our neighborhoods, I guess, in terms of punk, because of the fact that a lot of the stuff that was posed is for other people, and not to put them down for anything, but I mean, for us, it was things that we were actually living.
Yeah,
you know,
the struggle was real. The struggle was real. Yeah.
And so it lends an authenticity to you know, to Teresa's point, it lends an authenticity to the punk that comes out of our neighborhoods, you know, as opposed to say other places that may have had their own struggles and things that they had to go for. But, you know, for us, it was a lot more straightforward and kind of working class. Yeah.
Well, you know, Red Cross sang about surfing at the beach, you know.
Right.
And that's fantastic because, you know, they were really young. I mean, you know, Steven is like younger than I was, and I was 14 at the time, 15.
Yeah, he was 11, I think, when they started. Yeah.
Yeah, but
When
the
you
cool
think
thing is that they're singing about the beach, and at that time, Beach Boys weren't really cool. You wouldn't want to, be influenced by them too much, but they did that, and that's cool. So, there's that, that aspect.
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, I mean,
Other bands, other
Well, a lot of our writing was like was dealing with politics, acne, graveyards, religion, which we all grew up with. A lot of us must agree, the Catholic. But we were really into the Reaganomics. There was a lot of issues back then in East L.A. You had the riots, you had this, you had that. But like Jack had said in the interview, there was the Brown Berets too. And that was a big movement going on back then. So, I mean, there was all this stuff going on. But, when we were writing, like we used to go, like I told Jimmy in the interview, we went down from Mike's house. There's a little Mexican bar. They used to have his band playing there. And we went, they would let us in. We're underage. And they all were wearing suits and they're playing. And, me and, Mike's like, we're talking about the band. We're going, God, their uniform. Maybe we should do something like that. And that, as the name came about and everything, that's how that came about. But yeah, like Teresa and Jack and everybody says, Jimmy, we're all writing about what was going on around us. Everybody had a different view of what was going on around us, but at least everybody was able to put that in their music, their sound. And that's how you got these different sounds from the bands. I mean, the Stains, the sound, I mean, come on, that was like, boom. It was like a bomb going off in your face. The Brat had the hooks and we just, we wanted to be creepy, but Art's always like, we got to write kind of poppy type stuff. Okay, but can we put weird lyrics into it? That's how and thankfully we're all still alive and we were able to experience all this. And that's the whole thing, and my wife listened to the record when I finally got it. And she's like, oh my God, you guys are singing about what's going on now. And I start listening to it going, oh, I didn't even think about that. The plague, you're going to die. And all we were the fortune tellers of, I don't know, but it's like, you listen to the lyrics and you're going, why does it pertain to now? I don't know. But like I said, listening to all the other bands too, listen to their lyrics. They're writing about what's going on back then. But when Teresa's thinking about high school and stuff, look what kids are going through now. And, the Stains are singing about hold the Russians, hold the Russians. That stuff back then made a lot of sense because that was happening back then. All this shit was happening, the Russians and the Reagan and we're stuck in this little city and we want to be somebody. How do we do it? Well, we become musicians. Okay. Or magicians. I don't know. It's just like, but it worked for everybody. And that's what's great. All the records are slowly coming out. Things are getting reissued. The younger kids get to hear what we did. And we have to respect young punk bands because they're just carrying on the torch.
So yeah, you mentioned something that the records are getting re-released and sort of like a new. Well, some of them, Jack rolled.
I didn't say nothing.
Next one.
Wasn't me.
The records are getting re-released, and you're sort of creating a new generation of fans as people who. The Brat wasn't your only band. The Stains weren't your only band. How does that make you feel when maybe you've spent your life in music and you're constantly sort of remembered for something you did when you were essentially a kid?
That
flattering, does it get sort of like frustrating? Like I did all this other stuff.
Yeah, that used to bug me at first because I'm not sure if a lot of people know, but I started off as a drummer and I switched to guitar. So that was one of the reasons that it was a smoother transition for me because it was so different. And I went from being Gilbert to being Jack. I just completely wanted to get away from all that. So to be honest, when I was playing with the Crawdaddies and someone brought up the Stains, I was like, oh God, that was a few years later. But as time goes on, I embrace all those old bands, and I'm very proud of all the music I've been involved with. I've always been very picky about the projects that I join or play with. That's why I don't play too much, or didn't, before the plague. But yeah, there you go.
I think it's great. I think it's great that what we did back then is still relevant now. And like Tracy is saying, a lot of the things that we were writing about back then, unfortunately, are still happening now. Nothing has really changed.
And not to talk over you, but the lyrics to The Wolf, I think, are one of the greatest songs ever written, period.
Oh, thank you. And isn't it, I mean, it's sad that that situation is exactly the same, if not worse now than it was back then.
Yeah.
But I think that the fact, like I say, that the music still has some relevancy. I mean, that I would never have expected that, back in the day when I was writing that stuff. And I am flattered, always flattered that people still enjoy it and that people still get something from it. Because I think as musicians, as artists, that's why we do it, right? We do it so that we touch people and that we reach them somewhere and we speak to them in a way that resonates for for years, for decades. I think that's awesome. I'm totally flattered.
And that's another reason why one of the reasons why I wanted to make these, because one of the reasons I wanted to make these and kind of get this information out is also the people that are talking tonight, Teresa and Tracy and Jack, are part of the first wave of what was happening in East L.A. In terms of punk rock. There have been subsequent waves that have been going and going and going and ebbing and flowing since. I mean, there was a show last week, I think it was, that they had. So I mean, it's these are the foundations that are built on other foundations, of course, but these are the foundations of East LA punk rock that subsequent generations, starting with mine, which was the next generation of bands, which is like the hardcore stuff, they've all built on each other subsequently. And so it was important to me also to get this information out so that the kids that are coming out now see that they are connected to something that goes back 40 years. And at the same time, the people that started 40 years ago can see that this has continued and that there are still kids drawing inspiration and influence from all of it. And that there's still that connectivity and the things that connect those subsequent generations across that through line. Everybody is connected in a certain way to that. They can all go back and find commonalities in their experiences that have brought them to punk rock, and then in some cases branched out, and in some cases have come back,
Speaking of influences, I know in the Undertakers and the Stains videos, they kind of touch upon that, but Teresa, who were some of your influences that sort of shaped your musical identity?
Well, I liked a lot of bands, growing up. I like all kinds of music, but I think lyrically, I think the people that really spoke to me a lot probably was Dylan, because of what he did lyrically, how he could tell a story and at the same time say something political about it, saying something very personal. I really enjoyed, I've always enjoyed music that was melodic, right? I mean, I know that's kind of like a antithesis of punk, right? Punk's supposed to be just like in your face, and I can appreciate that too. But I've always liked bands that had like that melodic thing happening. And there's too many to name, but like I love the Clash, I love Susie, I love the Slits, I love grew up listening to David Bowie and Roxy Music. I love the Jam. There's, everything. There's like, I can appreciate everything. But I've always liked lyrics that were like maybe were turned the phrase or had something really interesting about them, and that had something to say. And yeah, so I always appreciated what Dylan used to do with his lyrics. Yeah.
Right. Speaking of clubs and live shows and things, something that none of us have done in a while, do you guys have any specific memories from the Vex?
Yeah. You want to know?
Not all the memories of the Vex.
Remember, I was very young, so
stand out. Like each of you have one
Well,
Number three.
I do. We played probably one of the second show at the Vex, and for me, that show was a really monumental time for me. I mean, it was a moment, you know, those moments when everything comes together, like a group of people come together, and it's something sparks. That Vex show is when I got to meet the people from Osco, right? Harry Gamboa and Grunk and like that more art type of scene. And I think that was a catalyst. It did something, the meeting of those people, right? I met Tito that night. He ended up producing our record. It was just a very special moment, that first show at the Vex. That memory will always be important to me. It kind of got the ball rolling.
I was there at the last show of the Vex, of the original one up on Gage in Brooklyn. The one
at Self Help Graphics.
Yeah, Self Help.
Self Help. Yeah, what is it? Yeah. That was terrible. I have a few friends from those days, and apparently it was this one guy. I'm not going to say his name, but this guy just started throwing shit around and everything. You know, this is when all the OC kids were coming up. Nothing against OC. But, you know, these knuckleheads, it's just like skinheads. See, this is when for me, it started getting ugly because it was more about, you know, like jocks, you know, like this jock mentality. Anyway, they tore the damn place up really bad. And I don't know how long it took. I would assume maybe a couple of months. And then they brought the new one up right across from the house I grew up in, you know.
Yeah, Paramount Ballroom, yeah.
The Paramount Ballroom, the Jack in the Box, that's what I call it. And then that's the one where it really, kind of blew up. You had like Social Distortion and all those guys coming down. It was amazing. Once again, I grew up across the street. You know, I grew up on that Jack in the Box. And here was this whole scene, you know, Rodney on the Rock, all these guys, Black Flag, Chiefs, everybody, Stains, everybody's down there, you know, everybody, you know, Illegals, you know, Brat, you know, Undertakers. So that, you know, it was amazing. I'm not sure how long it lasted. Maybe like 2 years. Jimmy would know, I guess. Right?
The original one, or the one at the Paramount?
The original one was around for a few months, I believe. No, the second.
Yeah.
Various locations. I think it finally closed in like August of '83 at various locations. The last one was the one on Soto that used to be the Copacabana discotheque.
Oh, see, I was waiting
right there. Yeah, that was when it was in Sereno. Yeah. That was I think that was August of '83 when that one finally closed down.
Wow.
But yeah, Tracy had a story. I remember when we talked, Tracy, you mentioned playing at the Vex with DOA.
Oh yeah.
That would be the second Vex. Yeah, the first Vex was cool because it brought a lot of the neighborhood, like Jack said, neighborhood kids came together. They had a place to go. They couldn't go to Hollywood. They didn't fit right. And we're not talking about outsiders. It's just that we're growing up in this neighborhood. These bands are starting. The kids are like, oh, crap, we got our own little scene going now. But yeah, we played with DOA at the second one. But a good story is when they had the Vex reunion show with I think the Stains played. I forgot who else. I think the Brat. Oh, okay, maybe it wasn't. No, I think it might have been.
No, they did play, I think. Yeah, but I think it was.
Anyways, what was interesting is I see all these kids coming down the street, and they're showing up, and I'm like, oh, you know, I noticed this big bunch of them. I go, where are you guys coming from? They go, we live down the street. Our parents used to see you guys here, and they told us to come check it out. And I said, wow, okay, that's interesting. But that's what I'm saying. The Vex was like a starting point. And then when the first one closed, the second one opened, I got to see Social Distortion. I got to see other bands that I never got turned on to, like Jack said, OC bands are coming into East L.A.
Big time.
Awesome. Bad Religion, you know, but playing with DOA was awesome. I think we played with Legal Weapon that night too. And to see all these bands wanted to play where we were at because they were going, wow, there's a scene out there. And we were like, wow, these bands are coming from out there. We get to see them now. We didn't have to drive to Hollywood. They were part of our scene now. So that would made it more like a unity thing, I would say. Like, you know, now it's punk. Now it's like, it doesn't matter who's here. If the band's good, we love them, you know. I remember seeing Social Distortion, and I told Art, we better get better. There's a band better than us. I mean, they were really, really good.
Yeah, Joe Suquette actually talked about that. When I talked to him, he talked about the fact that a lot of those bands like Social Distortion and some of the other bands, they were using it the way that I guess they originally envisioned the Vex, where the bands from East L.A. would be able to kind of use it as a springboard into the Hollywood clubs. There were bands like Kent State from Pomona, that area, and from Social Distortion from Orange County that was coming into the Vex and using the Vex to play as being able to give themselves credibility as in playing in clubs to be able to again springboard in. So that club ended up becoming very important in that way, and it also was a place where I think the Slits played there, and a few other bands. I mean, there were bands coming from other countries, from other states. The Big Boys from Texas came and played, DOA and Subhumans from Canada. So that became like a kind of a locus or a spot on the map where all of the different areas were diverging, not just within LA, but within Southern California and within the country. And so, I mean, there were other places that were open, like, the Cafe de Grand and stuff like that. But, in East LA, I mean, the Vex for a good time there was like the place to go,
Absolutely.
And you had Rudy's Pasta House too, that opened up. That was a whole different scene. I mean, we were playing with the Gears, the Brat, and those gigs were packed. I mean, I think this is when the Vex was only happening. Pasta House opened up. And then I think our very first show we did before they even had the Vex was the Montebello Ballroom. That was insane.
Yeah, I remember.
You remember that, Teresa?
Yeah.
Mike's brother threw a chair at you guys.
Yeah, I threw a mic at Sid, got him in the back. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
The Midnighters used to play there and premieres and all
And
those
he was
guys.
singing Victory in the police station.
So I'm sure you're all aware, there was a movie a couple of years ago about East L.A. punk called Los Punks. And the focus of that movie was kind of these backyard party shows. Was that something that was going on in the earlier days, or is that something that developed over time?
No, that's old. That's those were in the 70s, late 70s. I remember I was a kid and they were scary. Gee, I wish I could remember some of the bands back then, but they were all Sabbath, Zeppelin influenced bands. We're talking
like Slaney.
I just remember that they were called stoner parties, and they were usually, no lie, they were on Boulder Street, like north of Brooklyn Avenue, between like Wabash and Brooklyn, Fickett, that area.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, because like I said before, there's no clubs or anything for a band to play, and I guess these guys didn't think they could break out and play Gazaris or whatever it was back in the late 70s, for the rock bands. We're talking like when Van Halen was starting, like 76, 77.
Yeah, I remember those were the first gigs I went to, were probably backyard shows, right? Where you pay $5 and you get all the beer you want, and those were fun. Those were fun.
And I think a lot of the bands too, when we started, and this is we did gigs with the Brat, high schools, backyard parties.
Yeah, high schools, playing high schools.
Before we even got the Vex going, he did a show where I told Jimmy when we had cans thrown at us. It was an underground place. It looked like where the Beatles played at in Germany. Weird underground thing. These weird shows with Slaney, which was interesting. Slaney, the Illegals, and the Undertakers. We didn't even really know each other then. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We were just playing. But this is before the Vex started. But a lot of us started in backyard parties and going to backyard parties because, like you said, there was no clubs, and we're bored. We're young kids.
Plus we were children.
Right down the street.
How are you going to go to a club when you're 14, 15?
You start walking toward there, and all of a sudden you're at this party. You're like, "Ooh, wow! There's a party going on." That was it back then.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with that particular film, I mean, it doesn't really contextualize what it's talking about. And the thing is that, again, there have been several generations. The first generation of East LA, they were lucky in that they had the Vex and they had Rudy's Pasta Houses and things like that. They started just like everybody else. They started in the backyards because that's where you start. You can't just automatically start at the Whiskey with your first gig. In the case of the subsequent generations, once the interest was lost from that, the momentum from the original first wave was kind of lost. A lot of the attention what attention there was, I should say, kind of dissipated. And so that's where my generation would have come in, and that's when we started. We used to, my friend Shane White once called us the Brat and the Undertakers and the Stains, bratty younger brothers and sisters. And we were like the younger kids, and we lit same thing. We didn't have a place to play, so we played in houses and we played in backyards. And because of the dearth of places that we couldn't get into, because there was no local clubs anymore, and there wasn't, we weren't going to be allowed to play at Fenders because nobody was paying attention to any of it, and they really didn't think about us. We just kind of said, okay, well, fuck it. We'll focus all of our attention on the backyards. And so we started this kind of weird little network of backyard shows. And that's where we threw all of our focus in. And that has kind of, subsequent generations have kind of built on that. And they've kind of, you know, we finally moved our way out. We ended up in the late 80s and 90s. A lot of the bands from my generation started going into Al's Bar and Silver Lake Lounge and all of those places. And you know, what England had is, in terms of post-punk, we had in what was called Chicano Groove. And a lot of the bands that were in Chicano Groove were a lot of the old punker kids that were playing in the backyards, you know. And I can tell you to a band, what bands they were in, because we used to play shows with them in the backyards. But every subsequent generation, you know, when we moved out, there was another generation of bands that started playing the backyards. And then they developed, you know, you had Union and you had Social Conflict, and then Teenage Rage. And then they moved out and started playing clubs. And then there was a whole nother generation, and so on and so forth. I think the current one is Corrupted Youth is the big band in the backyards right now. But so that's kind of the context of that, which isn't in that film for various reasons. But that's kind of what that was focusing on, is the backyard scene in terms of what's going on, you know, currently. And so, yeah, that's kind of that in the history of that. So
and even with the bands, you know, we were doing the backyard parties, but then X got us to open up. X got the Brat to open up. The Stains went on to play with these big bands. So we started doing big clubs. And then, you know, we all got big heads. I guess we did. I don't know about anybody else, but it's like we started playing these big gigs and we're like, oh my God, we finally did something. And then, you know, it was just like, but at least we got to experience the beginning. And then we got to the point where we were like, hey, we finally did it. We're playing clubs now. We're doing big shows. There's people all over the place, you know. That was exciting. Even, I mean, the backyard parties were exciting, but to get into a club, you're backstage, you think we're rock stars now, you know, and you wake up the next morning going, what the hell did I do last night? You know, it's, you know, but you know, it evolves. Like Jimmy said, backyard parties, and then the bands get good enough where we can do clubs, you know, and people appreciate it, and people pay to see us.
I've been a musician my whole life too. And one time somebody asked me, like, what can you tell me about, you know, what's coming up, the future of your band? And I said, besides breaking up, I'm not really sure. But we have a question from Kathy Camper, but I mean, bands break up, but there's a lot of fun before that happens. And so Kathy Camper has a question. Can you share an anecdote, fun story that epitomizes what it was like back then?
I don't know if I could say it on camera. Seriously.
The words debauchery, is that what?
Well, you know, lots of weird stuff. Again, personally, I was very young. I was 15 when I was doing this crap. I was out of the Stains by the time I was 16. But you know, we were fortunate in that we played those big giant shows with Flag and Dead Kennedys and all that shit. And to me, that was great because, see, I was playing drums as a child. So for me to start playing, I was like, gee, finally, you know, because I was ready for years before that. But, you know, playing those big shows, man, and going on tour and, you know, that kind of stuff when I was young. I mean, you know, some shows were horrible. There were like 10 people, but many of them were just great with great bands. And a big chunk of that was just, you know, was earth shattering to my little brain at that time. You know?
Shows were.
It's very good. Yeah. Because I mean, we're talking primo. It didn't get much better than the era I got to play in, you know, late 79 to like 81. I mean, bang, you know. It had finally, you know, got its sea legs. It was a real scene at that point. You know?
Tracy, do you have a good memory?
What's that?
Do you have a good memory, like an anecdote or something that was?
Man, I don't know, man. There's just so much going on with the band and everybody doing what they wanted to do. But for some way, somehow, we didn't kill each other. I mean, I could tell you stories of band rehearsals where somebody punched somebody else out, but then we got a gig the next day and everybody's like, hey, what's up, buddy? And then after the show, I'm going to kill you. But for some reason, we survived until the end. I mean, we never had to change members. I mean, there was threats like, we're going to kick you out. Yeah, okay. So then what are you going to do? And everybody's like, okay. You know, but yeah, there was like a lot of debauchery. I mean, come on, I think all of us went through that, you know. There's stories at the Roxy I could tell you about fist fights in the street with certain bands, you know, and this and that, and wives cheating with husbands, and it was like a soap opera. We lived in a soap opera, but we lived in a good soap opera. It
Dogs
was like
and cats living together.
What else were we going to do? If we weren't doing this, what we would be at now? That's the thing. Yeah, we could be a commune. Yeah, you know. But yeah, you know, but it was a good time. I mean, you know, I have no regrets. I mean, like Jack said, I've done a lot of stuff with other bands. I've got to go to Europe, which was an experience, which is, you know, a lot of people don't experience. I've done a lot of good tours, but then you have the bad tours. But that's just part of life. And thank God we're all still alive. But, you know, when we're young, how would I say? When you're young, you're stupid, I would say. You just want to do this and that. But some people don't change. But when you do get older, you start realizing, God, how did I survive that? You know, how did I get through all that?
I say that every morning.
Yeah.
Even when the album came out, I haven't seen Mike and Art and Tony, you know, not in years. Like, we still talk, but all of a sudden they came to pick up their albums, and it was kind of a reunion with them. And there's no hard feelings. Nobody was like, well, just give me your records. They were like, oh, dude, this is awesome. You know, like, it's on vinyl now. And it was great from, you know, 4 years later to see these guys all come to the house, and we all sat down and we started talking about what you were saying. Remember when I did this? Remember when when I kicked you in the balls? You know, but that's the fun part of it, you know.
Getting kicked in the balls is always fun. Yep.
If you're gonna be a soprano.
Do you have any memory that stands out?
Who, me?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I think for me, the thing that stands out most to me, for me, was there was a time when you would go to shows and you knew everybody there, right? And the people that would come in, it was just like, it felt like a big family. It felt like everybody there knew everybody else. There was a really great sense of community for a while. And that was really nice. It didn't last for very long, I don't think, but that was a memory that I'll always remember, like going in and then, you know, playing with other groups, like playing with Los Illegals or playing with the Undertakers, and having a whole group of people that you see at every show that was supporting that community of people was a memory that I like, right? There was a lot of other stuff too that was not as nice that I also remember as well, because I remember too getting a lot of slack of people saying that oh well, you're not punk, and like making that judgment of you know, again, it's like you know, for me, punk has always been, it hasn't not been like a style of music, and it wasn't really like a way you looked or dressed. It was more like it was an attitude that you brought, and it was this sense of that, of like, I don't give a shit, so you don't say I'm punk, I don't give a shit. And it was this idea that I don't care what anybody says, I do what I do, and I'm proud of what I do, and I know that I have this in me, and I'm bringing it out there, and you could take it or leave it, and you could spit at it or do whatever you want, and that's punk. Punk is going out there and not being afraid of people saying shit about you, and that's in my experience, I got a lot of that. I got a lot of that, of people just like, oh, well, you, blah, 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 blah. Well, you're not the blah, blah, blah. And I must say that at the time, it really cut me to my heart a lot of times with things that people would say. But I realized that just putting myself out there and taking that abuse was very punk.
Yeah. And in the end, you actually won out because your band is one of the most highly regarded bands in LA punk now, you know, I mean, if in a lot of circles. So, I mean, I don't hear people speaking badly of that record, and that record is now considered a classic, and, you know, rightly so.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's good to know, because I didn't always feel like I was warmly welcomed in the punk world, you know. And I always felt like I had to prove myself. And I realize now, like, you know, the fact that I was even out there even trying to do that was my punk, you know. I don't care.
I mean, that's always been a thing, you know. People tend to have this tendency to try to like force things into these little definitions, and they get rigider and more rigid, I guess. And, you know, it's always been more interesting, the bands that are always on the fringes of those that have always been the most interesting, you know, as opposed to the ones that sound like the band that just played right before.
You know, and I think too, it's like the whole idea of punk as well, back, you know, the golden age of punk was that you accepted everything and everything was valid. And if people had the guts to go up there and do whatever it was that they did, then you respected that. You're right. It was like that was punk, to not put judgments on things, just like have it wide open. And yeah, so.
Teresa had a good point too. Like when we used to play, we had our own little crowd. They had their crowd. The Stains had their crowd. But when the bands would play together, or when they played together, all their crowds were together. But it did feel like a family because everybody knew each other.
Everybody knew each other. Yeah, it was awesome. That was really nice. I remember that, and that was very warm. Very nice feeling of community, right?
Then we had to like meet new people and see what they thought about us. And a lot of times everybody liked us. It was like, they were like, oh, you guys are so different, which made me feel like, okay, see, we're accomplishing something here. We're moving on, you know? We're not just stuck in one thing. You know, we're able to just keep going and make people interested in like, where are these bands from? Why do they sound like this? Where do they get their influences from? That's the whole thing about punk. Where do all these bands get influences from? You know, like Teresa said, I love The Clash. I mean, you know, they did their music was just influential. But if you listen to the record, like No Pay, we took that influence from going to the Mexican bars because they're always playing the cumbia and all this stuff. And Mike sat down going, we can write something like this. I go, but it's not punk. He goes, punk is punk. It doesn't matter what it is. As long as you believe in the music and you feel like it's part of you, then you're a punk. So I always like people I've taught guitar, do what you want to do, write what you want to write. But you know, once you become a songwriter, just do what you feel. You know, it doesn't have to be categorized. It's just music. You know.
You know, I remember we played a gig. I think it was at the Roxy, and we played with Bauhaus, and we opened for them. And that audience was just so wicked. We got on stage and they were spitting at us. They were throwing cans at us. They were just, I mean, awful. Like just.
Well, and now I bet you half that audience is saying like, yeah, I saw the Brat.
No, I don't know about that. I don't know about that, but I'm just.
Teresa.
I tell you, that was so hard. And we had to do 2 sets. So you go on and you get that abuse and it's like, shit, we got to go on again and get that same abuse again. Yeah, it was, that was rough.
Well, no abuse here. I want to thank everybody for taking part in this. I think this was pretty successful, and we got to get the Stains record out. So everybody.
It's coming. Soon come, baby. Soon come.
You know, easily get that music. Like now we can get the Brat and the Undertakers. And thanks to Jimmy for his hard work in putting together the Eastside Punks series. There's a 4th episode already, which is Nervous Gender, and more on the way. So everybody keep looking for the future installments of Eastside Punks. And thanks to everybody for taking part in this panel.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Dino.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
We'll be seeing you, everybody.
Yeah, and thank you out there, everybody, for watching.
Thanks for paying attention to all of this. Yeah.
Buy the records, damn it.
Buy the records, yes.
Jack, get that record out, damn it.
I'm working on it, baby. Trust me. Working like a demon. It's coming.
Great.